Wouldn't you like a jelly baby?
No, you didn't tune into the wrong show, folks. Yes, I would like a jelly baby, but good luck trying to get one to me right now.
Yeah. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Fun with Flags, where me and Soda talk about things. And Soda clearly is the much better intro-er of the show, as evidenced from the last couple of times we've done this show. So, Soda, why don't you introduce the topic of today's show and explain to the people why I'm dressed this way?
Okay, so this is actually a topic that I have been bugging, well, not really bugging 50, but I've been curious about ever since he first mentioned it. It is a holiday over in Israel called Purim, which, funny enough, when he told me what the topic was, the day before I had actually found a documentary on it, which I still have not watched because I want you to be the first to tell me about this holiday.
Yeah, and then you can check out the documentary and see how wrong I got it. But this, in a way, be honest with me, Soda. That's kind of the reason you proposed this show in the first place, right?
Kind of, not really. Like it was definitely an idea that popped in my head, and then as we were talking about it, then it was like, oh, then I could finally learn about Purim. Like that was just kind of more like the cherry on top.
Okay, so, well, you're getting it faster than you'd expect, obviously, because we started when we started it, and Purim is that early into the year, rather the Christian year, as you would call it. It's one of the first few topics we get to talk about. So last week I talked about a topic that I wanted to talk about, regardless of relevance to when the episode was airing. This week we're kind of doing this a Purim special. It will air eventually a couple of days before the actual Purim.
Well, yeah, this is airing on the Thursday, and Purim starts on the what? The Saturday?
On Sunday, yeah. Sunday. Which, oddly enough, that is when we will be recording your topic, but that's in the future as far as we're concerned.
Yeah, so, and before we went on, I finally had my topic.
Oh, cool.
And it's not sports related.
Thank you. I mean, yes, fine, yeah. Okay, so, Mr. Soda, sir, is you ready to learn about Purim?
Yes, let's put on some costumes and go explore.
Okay, cool. Now, ladies and gentlemen,
my PJs.
Oh, okay. Ladies and gentlemen, and sodas, this is the story of Purim. It is the story of a young man, a young man, a young girl, a dim-witted and easily swayed king, and his vile, evil, manipulative royal vizier. And no, I am not talking about this.
You were prepared. I love it.
Yeah, and you ruined my bit.
Sorry. I'm going to mute myself then.
Yeah, no, ladies and gentlemen, we are not talking about Disney's Aladdin, which, oddly enough, isn't all that accurate to the original story of Aladdin. But that's a story for another time. Now, remember in the first episode, Mr. Soda, that I took you back through the time vortex, past the Mandragora Helix, and into the long-distant past of the destruction of the Second Jewish Temple in the 1st century BC. Mm-hmm. We now travel even further back, 10 centuries to be specific, to the destruction of the first Jewish temple. But, and I will open the story by saying, this is not technically part of the story. This is a prologue to the story, because quite frankly, the actual story itself is incredibly short and brief. So in order to fill an entire episode, I got to give some prologue a little bit earlier for you and for the people in watching in the audience to acclimatize to where the story itself is taking place. So now, obviously, skipping a bit ahead in the holiday seasons, you are familiar with the story of Passover, am I right? I'm pretty sure everyone watching this.
Thank you, 90s Nickelodeon cartoons, yes.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously we've all seen The Prince of Egypt at this point, right?
Right. And I grew up Catholic, so I mean, there's a little bit of crossover there, so I was familiar with it from a young age.
Yeah. Right. So the Hebrew were enslaved by the Egyptians. Then Moses came along, the 10 plagues of Egypt. The Hebrew were freed. Yada yada yada. 40 years in the desert, they finally reached the promised land of Canaan and settled there. And their settlement is primarily identified as the 12 tribes of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Seen in this picture right here. Right here, you can see all 12 tribes. Obviously, you'll find more tribes here. Everything you see in the yellow is not one of the 12 tribes of Israel, right?
Yeah, the only reason I know about that is because of the lost tribe of Israel.
Story for another day. But
Right.
obviously, yeah, all the everything not in yellow is one of the tribes of Israel. Obviously, if you do your math right, you'll notice that there are 13 tribes here, not 12. Mainly because the tribe of Menashe was split in half.
I see that.
For some reason. Again, story for another time. But following the
which one are you in? Like
which
one? Like not. I know you're not one of the lost tribes, but which area do you live in?
I mean, again, my geography is not the best, but it's somewhere between Judah and Simeon.
Oh, okay.
Over there at the bottom.
Okay.
Yeah, there's another map over here that actually shows my city, but we'll get to that when we get to that. But so this is where specifically the 12 tribes of Israel settled, and following resettlement in the promised land of Canaan, they reformed themselves into the Kingdom of Israel. More specifically, the United Kingdom of Israel, way before the British did it, although it wasn't technically called the United Kingdom of Israel at the time, and we'll get into exactly why in just a minute. Let me see if this one actually shows my... Yeah, this one actually does show my city. Oh, wow, I was way off. Well, not by much. But, well, I can't show it to you with the cursor, but it's on the lower side of it. Let's just put it that way. Anyway, so this is how the United Kingdom of Israel looked like back in those days, around the 1000 BC, give or take a few decades. Okay, now over the many centuries, the Kingdom of Israel had several kings, but we're going to skip a few hundred years into the future to talk about arguably the most famous, or rather infamous, 3 kings of Israel. In that order, we're going to start off with the infamous King Saul. No, not that King Saul. Sorry about that. Yeah, not this King Saul. This idiot right here.
I'm gonna have to clip that out and send it to a few people to give them a laugh.
Dude, better idea. Put it as a short on this channel. Okay. So as I said, not this King Saul, this idiot right here, the infamous King Saul of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
This guy is an asshole, or rather, he was an asshole. He was a bad king, a very bad king. He abused his power in many different ways. One notable example was when God told him to go to war against the king of Amalek, and he ordered him, he instructed him that once he won the war, he would kill the king of Amalek. Really weird how the God asks people to kill someone for them, What happened to a merciful God and all that bullshit? But when we're not here to debate the semantics of the Bible. And anyways, this King Saul, rather than kill him as God ordered, took him in and treated him as kind of a house guest, which completely goes against God's decree. And God was very pissed at him, so he contacted his main prophet at the time, Samuel. No, not this prophet Samuel. This prophet Samuel. He instructed the prophet Samuel to go out and seek out a new king for Israel, a new king to replace King Saul, which he eventually did in the Ben Ishai family, landing on Ishai's youngest son, which will eventually be known as King David.
I know him, not that one.
No, not that King David. Sorry, this King David. Yeah, you're familiar with that guy, right? I mean,
David and Goliath. Yep, this is the ancestor to Christ, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, we'll get to that. Yeah, he killed a giant Philistine with a slingshot, basically, and became king as a result. Now, King David was also a bad king. He was not obviously as bad as King Saul, but he was also kind of a douche. He did a lot of good things, but he did mostly bad things, most notably the story of Bathsheba. Are you familiar with the story of Bathsheba?
Nope, but it sounds a lot like the town you live in.
Okay, so I'll just refresh for you and for the people watching. So one night, doing his nightly stroll around the city, King David notices a young woman called Bathsheba, and he sees her taking a bath, and I mean that in the literal sense. He literally saw her bathing, which you know what that means, right?
They had no modesty back then.
He's a peeping Tom.
Yep. He was the king of Israel, was a peeping Tom, and seeing young Bathsheba in her full naked glory, he instantly fell in love with her. Unfortunately for her, she was already married to Uriah the Hittite, and so what does the mighty and powerful and wise king of Israel does?
He kidnaps her.
No, don't be so you're not thinking fourth dimensionally, Soda. It's too small scale. What he does is he knows Uriah the Hittite is a member of the military of the Kingdom of Israel, so he sends him out to war while he's on the front line, knowing full well he is guaranteed to die in that war.
I've heard a story like this before.
It's a very famous story. There's I think Samuel later in the story goes back to King David after he sends Uriah the Hittite into war and makes Bathsheba suddenly easily available and takes her as his bride. Samuel comes up with obviously he doesn't want to tell King David that he did wrong because that would mean execution. So he just told him a story about a rich man with a rich farmer with many sheep, many cattle, and there's this one poor man with one sheep, but he loves the sheep like it was his own daughter, like he was a part of him. So and the rich man is jealous of the love that this poor man has with the to the sheep, that he has the man killed so he can take away his sheep. And obviously King David is outraged. How dare that rich man do that? And then Samuel goes and like, dude, that's exactly what you did to Bathsheba. That's a pretty notable, famous story from the Bible.
Interesting. Pretty much held the mirror up to him on that one.
Yeah. Imagine seeing yourself in the mirror in a story like that. Now, like I said, King David did a lot of bad things, and he, just like Saul, he angered God greatly to the point where God decreed a punishment on his head. And one of the many punishments that he gave David was that his children are now doomed to kill each other. There's another really famous story about one. Obviously, King David had several wives. He didn't just have one because obviously, he's the king. So he had several different wives and several different children from each different wife. And so one of his sons raped another one of his daughters, who was also a daughter of Bathsheba, if I remember correctly. And then one of her brothers, Absalom, heard about it, and they just walked up to that other brother and slit his throat in the middle of a royal feast, which forced King David to exile him and banish him publicly outside of the city. Now, obviously, Absalom came back several years later to exact revenge and kill his father, but because he let his hair grew way too widely, his hairs just got stuck on a low tree branch, and he hung there and starved to death.
Oh, that's a one way to go.
The Bible goes into weird places. Trust me.
I will give you that. I've read enough of the Bible to know that they were on some really strong back then.
Yeah, and according to some people, that's real history. Anyways, that's just one example of the many punishments that God gave King David. Another one was that the kingdom of Israel is now doomed to crumble and fall apart. But much like the punishment that he gave the other children, that they will kill each other, it would not be a personal punishment, it would be a generational punishment, meaning David himself will not suffer the punishment,
but
his children will. Meaning that whoever ends up being the eventual son and heir of King David, the kingdom of Israel will fall and crumble and fall apart during his reign. Eventually, the last remaining still alive son and heir of King David, the son and heir to the throne, ends up being the famous King Solomon. No, not that Solomon. This Solomon right here. King Solomon was a relatively good king. He did a few bad things, but nothing too bad, obviously. And he was such a good king and a wise king and a humble king that he actually swayed God to lessen the punishment a little bit. He couldn't undo the fact that the kingdom of Israel will fall apart during his reign, but he slightly altered the facts a little bit to ensure that the kingdom of Israel will fall apart as soon as King Solomon dies. Now, obviously, they still continued a sort of dynasty of kings after the death of King Solomon. He had several different descendants, and according to some accounts, 23 generations later, Jesus was born. So, according to many accounts, Jesus is a 24th descendant of King David,
which is one of the things I've heard about from Catholic school and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's something that I heard from art school, believe it or not. Anyways,
yes, folks, Jesus was a Jew.
Yeah, surprise, surprise.
Who knew?
So, anyways, King Solomon ages and dies of old age, and the kingdom of Israel falls apart and splits into two separate kingdoms: the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah, also known as the kingdom of Judea, as seen in this map right here. Those two kingdoms, because it's in Hebrew, the two kingdoms that I'm referring to are the green on the map. The light green and the darker green. The light green on the bottom, that is the kingdom of Judah or Judea, with their capital being Jerusalem. The darker green on top is the kingdom of Israel, whose main capital city is Samaria or Shomron. And you can actually, if you look at the green, the light green, the kingdom of Judea, all those red dots are cities. The one on the bottom side, that's my home city.
Just so okay, the bottom of the four.
Yeah, there's a three at the top and another one at the bottom. The bottom one is mine.
Nice.
That's why I said I was way off on the location thing. Now, these are the two remaining kingdoms. The kingdom of Judea was mainly comprised of 2 of the 12 tribes of Israel, the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin. And the kingdom of Israel was primarily comprised of the remaining 10 tribes. Now, several years later, the kingdom of Israel was conquered and absorbed by the Assyrian Empire and were lost to the sands of time ever since. Don't worry. Yeah, don't worry. They do come back eventually, but that's not really relevant to the story. That's several hundred years after our story ends.
I do want to add a little bit to that. One of my favorite jokes about the lost tribes of Israel is in Blazing Saddles.
I don't remember that.
You know when they run up across the natives in the desert? The Native Americans? They're speaking Yiddish.
The natives?
Yeah, when Mel Brooks is dressed up as the Indian chief. He's speaking Yiddish. They're supposed to be the lost tribe of Israel.
Oh.
Yeah.
I did not pick up on that.
Yeah, they're speaking Yiddish.
and I rewatched that movie recently. And
yeah.
Okay, that's weird. That's weird and random. But anyways, as I mentioned, the kingdom of Israel is kind of lost and absorbed by the Assyrians, and the kingdom of Judah or Judea continues to operate for a few decades later before eventually being conquered and absorbed by the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Not the Babylonian Empire, the Neo-Babylonian Empire. It's like a very common mistake. But don't worry, it's a relatively brief occupation by the Neo-Babylonians. And during which time, the main city of the capital city of Jerusalem, and more importantly, the Jewish temple, which was constructed during the time of King Solomon, which is why it's most commonly referred to as Solomon's Temple, is being horribly ravaged by the ruthless king of Neo-Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar. Nope, not that Nebuchadnezzar. This douche nozzle right here.
Okay, then.
So yeah, he disrespects the Jewish God. He disrespects the Jewish city, ravages the Jewish temple, and when the Jews decide to take up arms against him, he destroys the temple. And stop me if you heard this before. Following this, he decides to exile them and scatter them all over his empire.
No, you don't say.
Yeah, again, stop me if you heard that before. But like I said, it was a relatively short occupation because the Neo-Babylonian Empire very quickly fell and was conquered by the larger and more powerful Persian Empire. I'm pretty sure you might have heard about that one.
This is a little movie called 300 that talks about them.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, and right here in the Persian Empire around the 6th century BC, that is where our story finally begins. That is where we begin our story of Purim. So all of that was just the lead up, the prologue to this, just historical background and setting up the stage and the main players.
Quite the appetizer.
Yeah, quite the appetite. Again, we covered several hundred years in just 20 minutes, so we're doing pretty fine.
That's a record.
So, yeah, we go back to the Persian Empire around 6th century BC, and we are here to talk about the main players that I mentioned earlier: the king, the young girl, the young man, and the royal vizier. And we start with the dim-witted and weak and easily swayed king. Nope, not that king. This king right here, King Ahasuerus.
I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that.
Yeah, and I promise you, the names are only going to get more and more complicated as we go along.
I read the Bible. I believe it.
So King Ahasuerus was one day decided he was bored and fed up with his current wife, Vashti, so he has her hanged.
Because as one does.
That's as one does. And so he decides to go out and seek out a new king. He goes out and seeks a young girl. He will eventually turn into a queen. Not this one. No, that'll be too creepy. He eventually finds a young girl called Esther.
I know what. What is this? The same biblical Esther?
It might be. Okay. Maybe if we'll continue on, you might actually find that you actually know the story better than you thought.
Okay, keep going. I'll mute my.
You don't have to keep asking questions if you feel the need to. It's good for the conversation.
True.
So King Ahasuerus meets the young girl named Esther, who obviously is the Jew, and who is also hiding the fact that she's Jewish, going by the name Hadassah, and he decides to marry her. Around the same time, obviously, as I mentioned earlier in the story, he's got this scheming, conniving, and evil royal vizier. And no, again, I'm not talking about this guy. I'm talking about this guy.
Another guy in a big turban.
Yeah. Haman. Haman the Agagite, also known as Haman the Evil or just the Evil Haman. And one day, while going out in a patrol of the city, he encounters a young boy. Nope, not again. Sorry, not this young boy. He encounters a young boy called Mordecai. Nope, again. Sorry, no, not this Mordecai.
Hey, who's that Mordecai?
Mordecai Anilevich, a Jewish partisan during World War II.
Gotcha.
Seriously, look him up. I've been to his to a village named after him. It's a really interesting story. Again, story for another day. But yeah, not this Mordecai. This Mordecai right here, also known as Mordecai the Jew.
That's a little on the nose. Mordecai the Jew.
Mordecai the Jew, yeah. Something I forgot to mention. Several years after the kingdom of Israel, the United Kingdom of Israel. That's why I said it was called the United Kingdom of Israel. It was called that retroactively because it was when the kingdom of Israel was united, as opposed to being split in two. But by that point, the last remaining members of the kingdom of Judah, or the kingdom of Judea, decided to call themselves Jews. They were no longer called Israelites or Hebrews. They decided to call themselves Jews around that time. And one day, during a patrol of the capital city of Susa, or Shushan, depending on who you ask, Haman encounters the young Mordecai, who refuses to bow down to him or kneel to him. In other words, he refuses to kneel before Zod, as it were.
Very nice.
And Haman is angered by this young boy's insolence, so he goes back and whispers in the king's ear, and he whispers in the king's ear and convinces him that the Jews are all bad, that the Jews are all insolent young little children, and that they need to be exterminated. Again, stop me if you've heard that before. Yeah, he orders a mass extinction, a mass extermination, a mass massacre of the Jews on the 13th day of the Jewish month of Adar. And that event is would be known as a Pur, meaning a massacre, a slaughter, a uprising against the Jews. That is the colloquial translation for the, at the time, Persian word Pur. He would announce several Purs around the 13th, 14th, and 15th days of the month of Adar, and the literal plural of a Pur in Hebrew is Purim. So that's where the name Purim comes from. And like I said, he manages to eventually convince the weak and feeble king that the Jews need to be dealt with. So he sends out a message all throughout the empire, this massive empire to be specific, that the Jews will be that it would be okay to kill Jews around those specific dates.
Oh, good.
Now, the newly anointed Queen Esther hears about this, and she goes, and what's the first thing she does? She goes and talks about it to her cousin Mordecai. Remember him?
Mm-hmm.
So she tells him about it, and what does Mordecai tell Esther to do? He tells her, "Hey, you're the king's wife. You have some influence over him. Go talk to him and convince him that Haman is evil, and he only has it out for the Jews. Obviously, don't tell him that you're a Jew yourself, because that would make you biased. But just tell him that Haman is evil and needs to be dealt with. And you know what? The king believes her. Like any good king, he falls and crumbles beneath his queen.
Naturally.
And so the king announces a new decree, a new law, that on the 13th, 14th, and 15th day of the month of Adar, there won't be a massacre of the Jews. Instead, the opposite would happen, that the Jews will be allowed to defend themselves and kill, if necessary, against anyone who wishes to do them harm. So when the Jews are eventually attacked on those days, the Jews fight back, eventually resulting in the slaughter of no less than 75,000 Persian citizens, not Jews, Persian citizens, on that day, the day where the Jews rose up against the oppressors and against the evil of Haman.
Okay. So you know how I asked earlier how this was the book of Esther? It is the book of Esther. This story's in the Bible.
Yeah, I mean, I did say keep listening. I didn't want to spoil that for you.
You're right. You were right. It is in the Bible. That's pretty freaking cool.
Well, where did you think the story came from?
Well, I know. Well, it's because I know how the Bible was written. I know that a lot of it was mishmashed over time. There could have been more than one famous person named Esther, for all I knew.
True. I mean, The other famous Esther that I know of is my grandmother, but that's beside the point. So on the days of the 13th, 14th, and 15th days of the month of Adar. One day I'll do a whole topic about the Jewish months. That might be something to explore there. But the Jews rose up against the Persian citizens who wanted to do them harm, slaughtered 75,000, and the evil Haman was put in his place. He was forced to lead Mordecai riding on a horse all through the streets of the capital city of Shushan or Susa, saying the phrase, thus will be done to the man that the king wished to honor. It's a rough translation, so please don't quote me on that. I'm not sure it's 100% word for word, but that's more or less the phrase itself, the iconic phrase that Haman was forced to say while carrying the Mordecai through the streets of Shushan, saying, "Thus will be done to the man the king wished to honor." And following this event, after the walking around the entire city, Haman and his wife Zeresh were hung along. What are you doing?
So while I'm listening to you, I'm on Wikipedia just doing a little bit of looking up on the Book of Esther, and I clicked on Haman. So Haman in literature and popular culture. Haman is featured as the primary antagonist in the South Park episode Jubilee, where he's portrayed as attempting to re-enter the mortal world in order to rule once more over the Jews. Continue.
Right, and speaking of the evil Haman, him and his wife Zeresh were hung along with their 10 children, rather 10 sons, also known as the 10 sons of Haman. And just in case you're wondering, their names, and get ready for this, their names are Parshandata, Dalphon, Aspata, Poata, Adalia, Aridata, Parmeshata, Arisai, Aridai, and Vaizata.
A few of those sounds like characters in my D&D campaign.
Now, I did say the names are going to get crazy from here on out.
Did one of them end in die?
Let me check.
I think it was one of the later ones. I think it ended in die.
Aridai. So these are just the 10 that are specifically mentioned by name in the Bible. Some accounts say otherwise. Some accounts would suggest that he actually had 40 children, as was common at the time. One account suggests 100 children, and another relatively unreliable source claims that he actually had 202 children. But again, these are all different accounts. These are just the 10 that are specifically mentioned and referenced in the book of Esther in the Bible. Now, following this event, the 3 days that the Purs took place, the 13th, 14th, and 15th days of the month of Adar were declared a national holiday for the Jews wherever they may be, and 4 main tasks are expected by every Jew to perform on these specific days. The first and most important one is the reading of the book of Esther on the 13th day of the month of Adar. The second one is an exchange of gifts between friends. The third one is a presentation of food products to the less fortunate and the poor. And the fourth one is to celebrate and get drunk so that no one will be able to recognize friend from foe, as the Jewish people celebrated in the capital city of Shushan and all over the Persian Empire on the day that Haman was hanged.
I dig that. On the final day, let's just all get verschnicket.
Yeah. Let's all get hammered. Now, you may be wondering to yourself if those are just the 4 main tasks, right? The reading of the book, exchanging gifts, giving food to the needy, and getting drunk and wasted. Where does the costume thing fit into all this?
Can you repeat them again before?
Yeah, the reading of the book of Esther.
Yep.
Exchanging gifts, giving food to the needy, and getting drunk and wasted.
So my bet would probably be the last one in around there.
Okay, that's an interesting hypothesis.
Well, it's just because that's the one where you let loose and have more fun. But I could also see that being around the after the reading, and then being in costume the rest of the time too. So I mean, like those are the two that I think after the first one and right around the fourth.
The fourth, but
it would be 50.
Yeah. So here's the main kicker of this. Are you watching this?
I'm listening. I am. I can see you out of my peripheral. Don't worry.
Cool. I wish I had your peripheral vision.
I've also got two screens. One of them slightly tilted, so I can see it all at once. So
one day you gotta send me a picture of your layout. How you're set up.
Okay, proceed.
Okay, so here's the main kicker, the meat of this whole story, the make or break moment. Are you ready for this?
I'm listening.
You also need to be watching as well.
I'm looking. I'm just sending you that pic. Go ahead.
Okay, so here's the thing.
None of that story is true, is it? No.
What?
None of that story is true.
Fuck off.
None of it took place. It's a fictionalized mythological tale written in the book of Esther. None of this really happened. There was never, in the entire history of the Persian Empire, there was never a king named Ahasuerus. In the entire history of the Agagites, there was never a man called Haman. The names Mordecai and Esther were never a part of anywhere. They are literally not mentioned anywhere else besides this one book that's not even a book, it's a scroll, the scroll of Esther, which is one of the many books, many segments in the Bible, which coincidentally enough was actually found and discovered in a cave far away from all the other.
Yeah, it's one of the two that doesn't mention God in the New Testament, I think, or in the Old Testament, I should say.
Let me finish. The book of Esther, or rather the scroll of Esther, was actually found in a cave far away from all the other scrolls that are actually part of the Bible, and it was found no less than 200 years after the events of the story supposedly take place. So, everything you thought you know about the story of Purim, it's fictional. It never happened. It's a cool story. It's a very fun story, but that's all it is. It's a story. The story in and of itself mentions only 3 kings of Persia, and you know what? That really should be your first clue, is that it refers to them as kings, not emperors, which is what the Persians were at the time. But it only mentions 3 kings of Persia, and that the occupation by the Persian Empire only lasted for 52 years. In reality, in the actual recorded history of the Persians and many other cultures from around that time, there were actually closer to 10 emperors of the Persian Empire, and the occupation of that region actually lasted for a lot closer to 220 years. So clearly there are some discrepancies between every major account from the entire area and in the entire history versus this one tiny piece of storytelling that was found in a secluded cave far away from everything, and was found years later after this whole affair supposedly happened. So what scholars and students of the Bible would argue is that the tradition of Purim was actually inspired by several different Persian holidays that were taking place in and around that time, that the Jews were influenced by after being exposed to this foreign culture for so long, and
sounds sort of like for us over here in the West.
Yeah, pretty much. So they just adapted a lot of the traditions and celebrations into their own culture, and they needed something to unify them. They needed a story to make the events of.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna watch that documentary now, because I want to see them go into that more from a scholarly level, because I'm interested now. I did not see that coming.
Yeah, me neither. And I grew up knowing this story, and I literally only found that out a couple of weeks ago researching this for you.
Really?
Yeah. Thank you for forcing me to do this. I Really needed that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and send me that documentary too. I want to check it out too.
I will, and I'll even send you another bonus thing because I'm like, I know I've seen this in animated form before. There was a series, again, grew up Catholic. My grandma introduced them to me. They're called The Greatest Stories Ever Told, and it's basically recounting of biblical stories. These three people get sucked back in time, and they relive these events. And one of them is on Queen Esther, and I found it on YouTube, so I'll send it to you. It's only like half an hour.
Cool.
But here's something you'll really get a kick out of. The guy who plays Moki is the same voice actor as Pinky.
The guy who plays who?
There's a character in there called Moki. He's one of the three main characters.
Oh,
He's voiced by Rob Paulson.
Yeah, Rob Paulson. I love Rob Paulson.
Yeah, Rob Paulson's the best.
Yeah, I brought up a clip from Johnny Bravo earlier. He did a lot of voices there.
Right on.
And also, side note, I'm also apparently I liked the show Wednesday so much that I decided to go back and rewatch all the Addams Family stuff. And he does a lot of voices on the animated one.
It's very. If you look at his IMDb, you're like, did that guy ever rest?
Yeah, I mean, I think wasn't he also one of the Animaniacs as well? No, he was.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He's Yakko.
Yeah, he's Yakko.
He's Yakko. He's also the original Donatello in animated form.
Never watched the English version of that, but I think didn't he also voice what's his face? Experiment 625 on the Lilo and Stitch TV series.
He might have. I'd never seen that series.
I love that series. Anyway, so I think that's it. That's the story of Purim. I did say the actual story itself is pretty short, but yeah, that's
yeah. He plays Reuben in Stitch the movie.
That's him. Yeah, that's Experiment 626.
Okay.
65. Sorry, 625.
Cool. Yeah, no, he's got a lot of credits. He played Sal Maroni in Batman Gotham Knight. He's Pete in the Goofy movie and the Goofy movie sequel. He's the Riddler in Lego Batman the movie, DC Superheroes Unite. Sure.
I saw that one.
Yeah, no, he's got a pretty big list of credits.
Cool. So how did this story of Purim actually became a talk about Rob Paulson's filmography? Great topic for another show, but
Random.
So, do you have any final thoughts? I think this is the shortest episode I have ever done when I'm talking to someone. Least of all you.
I'm proud of you.
I mean, hey, that's what happens when there isn't enough lore to talk about.
And apparently the story's bullshit.
We both know.
Right. And also it helps when the story's apparently bullshit. Because that was quite the twist. I didn't see that coming. So I'm definitely gonna be doing some research. I was thinking that. I'm like, God damn, I wish we had that clip. What a twist.
What a twist. I can look it up if you like.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, I don't know if I have any more questions because I'm still kind of reeling for the fact that it's all fake. Like, wow.
So did I. But yeah, again, somehow they managed to find a way to squeeze the costume element into it. Now,
yeah, I was gonna say, like, how did the costume part come into it? Because that's the story of the creation of Purim, but now tell me about the modern version of it.
Well, I mean, like I said, I did read a couple of articles from these scholars, several of which are actually Jewish rabbis, by the way. So it's not like they're going against their faith. One of them in particular said he like I said, he's a genuine rabbi, and he says, "Listen, I'm still a firm believer of God and the Bible. I just don't really believe in the story of Purim as an actual historical event. It's a really fun story, and I love it. Just it's not real. There's no evidence to support any of it. So some of them just suggest that the Jewish people just took a lot of the tasks from different other Persian holidays from around that time. Like, and I apologize, I can't really remember the names of all the other Persian holidays, but there's one that specifically touches on dressing up in costumes and handing out gifts to people. One specifically touches on presenting food products to the needy. And a third one that's all about celebration and getting drunk. So I guess some of the Jews felt like the need to celebrate something on their own. So they just took elements from all three of these different holidays that took place in and around that same time, and again, some of these articles have no concrete evidence to support why specifically those dates, the 13th, 14th, and 15th. So,
well, it's just, again, back to draws a parallel to Christmas. It's like there is no concrete evidence that suggests that December 24th or 25th is Christ's birthday. That's just the date they chose.
Well, I mean,
that's winter solstice and all that stuff. But I mean, like in the Bible, there is no date of when Jesus was born. And if they use like constellations and shit like that, they estimate he was born somewhere in the middle of the summer.
Yeah. And really, if you actually delve deeper into that, the whole Christmas in December thing, it's mainly just the goth first day of the year, rather the New Year's celebration is the 31st of October, which is Halloween, and the extreme Catholic Christians really did not like the idea that the first day of the year is a pagan, as they call it, pagan Gothic holiday. So they decided to invent the idea that Jesus' birthday was on the 24th-ish, so that the New Year's celebration will be celebrated 8 days later, which in keeping with Jewish traditions, that's circumcision. The circumcision is done 8 days after a baby's birth. To coincide with, if it's on the 24th/25th, the circumcision day would be the 1st of January. So that's really where that whole idea came from. And that's why they decided to stick Christmas on those dates. And then obviously, years later, St. Nicholas from Sweden, I believe. I can't remember the name of the European country. He made the rounds, giving gifts to children. And that's where the idea of Santa Claus came from, or rather, St. Nick. So,
Turkey. He's Turkish.
Really? Mm-hmm. Wow. Another Christian thing that came from Turkey, oddly enough.
Yeah, St. Nicholas of Myra was an early Christian bishop of Greek descent from the maritime city of Myra in Asia Minor during the Roman Empire. Yeah.
Fun fact, Christianity kind of started in Turkey, but that's a story for another time. And probably another show also. So I guess we sort of covered several different holidays today. Can't wait for next month to talk about Passover, right?
Yeah,
my second favorite holiday.
Yeah, it's that's one I can't wait to touch on because, most of us over here know from the Rugrats special.
Or the Prince of Egypt, or the Ten Commandments.
The Ten Commandments, the Charlton Heston movie. Really good movie.
Still never seen that one. You know what? This year, that's going to be the year I'll sit down and watch it.
Have you ever seen any of Charlton Heston biblical epics?
What?
You ever seen any of his biblical epics, like Ben-Hur and stuff like that?
No, I think the only historical epic I've seen was the Cleopatra movie. That didn't start Charlton Heston, did it?
Ben-Hur is another.
I know Ben-Hur. I know Ben-Hur.
That's another one where the story's bullshit. It's not real. It's actually based off a novel.
Yeah, what are you gonna do?
Written by the same governor of New Mexico who didn't pardon Billy the Kid, which led him to go on the run. Funny enough, that's a wild story.
Okay.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So I did show a clip from Back to the Future earlier in this show. So thank you. This was very educational.
This was. Now, do you want to know what my topic is for next week?
Before you say that, just wanted to point out, this was for you, Ben.
Always, my dude. Always. Okay, so my topic for next week is not sports related. It's actually true crime.
Okay.
It is the Mad Trapper of Rat River. This was a manhunt through the Yukon and Northwest Territory, or through the Yukon territories in the 1940s. Basically, this man led the RCMP on a manhunt through the snowy wilderness and somehow managed to outrun them with just snowshoes and what he had on his back. It is a fascinating story. They still don't know who he is to this day. Yeah, it's a pretty cool story. It's one of my favorite true crime stories.
Sounds like it would make a good subject for a movie.
I wouldn't be surprised if they have made it into, if it at least has been thought of. But yeah, no, it's definitely gonna be a fun one to talk about. And I'll try to have pictures to show you just how far he traveled and stuff like that. It's wild.
What's the time frame around that?
Hold on. This is almost 100 years ago. I know that. The Mad Trapper. Albert Johnson, 1932. Sorry, way off. So yeah, we're coming on 80.
I mean, it is kind of 100 years ago.
Yeah, it's almost 100 years ago. Yeah. Yeah. Northwest Territories, Yukon. It was the media were covering it like it was a big deal.
I love how most of the topics that you're giving me are like from the last 200 years, and I usually go back to several thousand years ago.
But here's the thing: you have reason to, because your part of the world is older than my part of the world. Well, relatively speaking.
Well, the people,
cultural wise,
the culture.
Yeah. No, this is fun, and I can't wait to talk to you about. So,
I can't wait to talk about my next topic. That's going to be a doozy. And that will be educational. And you know what, Mr. Soda? That one, my topic for next 2 weeks, will demand your full attention. So
you got it. I will turn everything else off.
Okay, so do you want to sign off?
Yeah, all right. So yeah, 50 the usual. Where can everybody find you?
You can find me on my own YouTube channel, 50 Shades of Geek. I do weekly reviews of every single Doctor Who episode from 1963 all the way to 2022, as well as some other random stuff whenever I have time to do so. And also, you can find me on this channel, on the Greatest Show in the Galaxy, every Monday, where I do a deep dive into the Greatest Show in the Galaxy, Doctor Who, with a rotating roster of guests every week. And I'm still not sure where or when it's going to drop, but I recently was a guest star on a show with Chris Ingle and Brennan Meyer. We talked for a while. I don't even know how long it was, but we talked for a while about Star Trek Insurrection, a underrated Star Trek movie, in my opinion. That's more or less where you can find me. And by the time this comes out, I should already be live on Taco's big, massive, mega alien game, or Star Wars or Not game. He does like combination of the alien game, the planets game, and robots and vehicles, and all kind of weird stuff. So yeah.
And as for me, you can find me Soda_the_Saxman on my personal Instagram and Twitter. You can find me here on the Northern Entertainment Group doing shows over here. You can also find me occasionally on Mondays and Fridays doing live watch-alongs of Raw and SmackDown over in the Hotel Nerd Network. Kind of fell into that one. And also, we just announced over on the Books of Wrestling that we are actually going to be transitioning that into its own YouTube channel. So definitely check that out. It's going to be an all-wrestling channel and maybe some Schmodown stuff involved in there as well. So definitely look at that. That's over on the Let's Get Ready Network. Just follow me over there. And yeah, that pretty much brings it to Fun with Flags. I almost said Flags for Fathers. I'm like, that's a movie.
Yeah, not really related to the topic we're talking about today.
Not even close. So on behalf of myself and 50, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you next week when I take you guys through the Canadian wilderness on the hunt for the Mad Trapper of Rat River. Have a good day. See you next week, and don't forget, folks, let your geek flag fly, man. That's what we're all here for. Enjoy life.
Yeah. And happy Purim.
Happy Purim.